Alright, so basically what I'm doing here is I'm with my friend. He just started playing the game. He installed it on Sunday, and he asked me to help him with the deck building because he's totally new, total beginner, and he wanted me to help him with deck building. And I decided, you know what, this is I've done this for like 3 or 4 people, and it's always pretty interesting. So it's a good thing to stream it and video it. So that's what we're doing. So he's going to ask me some questions. I'm just going to show my answers on stream. This is his account. His collection is reasonable. He spent like 50 bucks. I think spending 50 bucks is pretty reasonable. It's the equivalent of buying a game. Like most games cost like 50 bucks. So he has some cards. I have no idea what he has. He's only played Mage and Priest so far. We're just going to get right to it. So I'm going to let him ask me questions, and I'm going to repeat what he says because this mic isn't doing a great job of picking him up. And then we'll see how it goes. So that's what we're doing. Let's go. So his name is Chad, and that's it. So what?
All right. Well, so I know it's gonna sound like pretty basic, but my first question is, how do I even start building a deck? What are my goals?
Okay, so he's asking what his goals are in building a deck. So my answer to that is obviously to win the game, right? But so the main thing that you want to focus on, especially as a new player, is making sure that you have a nice balanced cost of spells. Which, I mean, if I'm looking at some of these decks he already has, they already have a nice balance of spells, pretty reasonable. You can find that by mousing over the portrait up here, and you could see, like, you know, you have 5 cards that cost 2, 5 that cost 3, 5 that cost 4. You want to have a nice balance of spells like that, but generally it's better to have more like this. This looks like a pretty good mana curve, which is more early game things, more 1s and 2s, and then tapering off down to 3 or 4 cards once you get into the 4, 5, 6s, and 7 pluses. So that's the first thing you want to focus on. The second thing you want to focus on is cards that work well not only by themselves but also together. So no matter which class you play, there'll be cards that kind of interact together, so you want to keep those interactions in mind when you're building a deck. And then also, I guess you want to keep in mind the hero power, right? So like if you're playing a priest, for example, you may want to play creatures that interact well with the hero power because you can heal a minion. So if you have a minion that has a lot of health, it's better in a priest deck. Also things like there's a card which you probably don't have, but whoops, which this, you do have it. This guy right here, he deals 4 damage to himself when he comes into play, right? He's a 4/7. When he comes in, he's a 4/3, but as a priest, you can heal him, and he becomes a 4/5 for 5 if you want, right? So keeping that in mind is also something you want to keep in mind. The other thing when I build decks, the main thing I do is I go through all the class cards first, and I pick all the cards that I think are the best class cards that I'm going to want to play no matter what. And that's actually something that I'm planning on doing for my next series of articles on Hearth Junkies is basic like class templates for all the classes where it shows you the cards that you want to play no matter what. For example, if you're playing a druid, you always want to play Innervate no matter what. It's a defining card to every single druid deck. Every single druid deck will have Innervate. Every single druid deck will have Wrath. Every single druid deck will have Keeper of the Grove and Swipe and some other cards. But learning what those cards is I guess just experience. But as you learn those cards, you'll realize that those, and I mean I can help with that too, because that's, like I said, that's my plan, is to do that for my next series of articles. But you start off with that base, and then you kind of go from there. You look at the mana curve, you see where you have weaknesses, and then you try to fill in those weaknesses. I don't know if that was a good answer.
No, that's
or
a great answer.
Okay.
My next question, I was struggling with deciding how many minions I should have versus other types of cards, like secrets and all this other stuff.
Okay. So his question is deciding on whether he wants minions or spells and cards. So the answer to that as a new player is that you want primarily minions with just a few spells to supplement or a few weapons to supplement. The reason for that is just in general, this game is more or less about the board, and controlling the board is having minions on the board. And in general, as a new player, that's the first thing you want to learn and the first thing you want to focus on. So most of your decks will have mostly minions. There are decks in the game that have a lot more spells and secrets and stuff like that, but definitely as a new player I recommend, I mean, I would do something like planning on having at least 20 minions in your deck, and probably more like something along like 24 minions in your deck as a starting player.
And that's for all classes.
Yeah, as a starting player. I mean, so, like, for example, if you're playing a druid, you want to play Innervates and Wraths and probably Swipes, and then probably most of the rest of it will be minions as a starting player. Now, there are some exceptions, right? Like, for example, as a druid, Power of the Wild is a card which can give minions +1/+1 or summon a panther. That is the equivalent of a minion as well, right? So even though it's a spell, it's also a minion because it creates a minion. So there's exceptions like that, but I think for the most part you want primarily minions as a new player. Now, as you get more experienced with the games, you can start using more of the spells, but this game's kind of unique in the fact that the minions, since damage is permanent, minions are kind of damaged. For example, let's say you were playing a mage and you were going to use a Frostbolt to do 3 damage to something, right? That's 2 mana to do 3 damage to something and freeze it. Well, alternately, you can play a minion, which is... Where's the guy? I'm missing this 2-mana minion. Bluegill Warrior. Okay, this guy's a 2/1 charge. For all intents and purposes, he's more or less a weaker Frostbolt because he comes into play and does 2 damage right away. So even though he's a minion with 1 health, he can be used as a pseudo Frostbolt as well, right? So he's more versatile because he can stay on the board and do damage to your opponent, or he can be used to do 2 damage to something. Now, I'm not saying Bluegill Warrior is better than Frostbolt because it isn't, but just in general, the point is that, as you can see, like, minions are kind of like spells. I mean, they can do damage to the minions as well. And since the damage is permanent, if somebody plays a big minion that has 5 health, doing this, you know, playing another guy that has 3 health, that damage will probably stick. Now, there's obviously exceptions, right? Priest can heal the minions and stuff like that. But, so yeah, you definitely want mostly minions as a new player.
This is probably a really basic question. Could you explain the different colors of the see here for different cards?
Right. Okay. So his next question is asking about what these little symbols on the cards mean. So it's just the rarity. Common cards have a little silver thing in the middle, and actually basic cards are count as common even though they don't have a silver thing in the middle. And then rare cards have a blue thing in the middle. Epic cards have a purple thing in the middle, and legendary cards, which he may or may not have. Okay, you have a couple. Legendary cards have a yellow or orange thing in the middle. That's the rarity of the card. That's not only how likely it is to open it, but it's also how valuable it is as far as crafting. So you can see crafting mode. I'm sure he hasn't probably even done crafting mode. Crafting mode allows you to disenchant any card to get dust, and then also craft any card. And based on the rarity, you get different amounts. So if you disenchant a common card, I'm not going to actually do it, but you only get 5 dust for disenchanting, and it costs 40 dust to make a common card. For rare cards, if you disenchant a rare card, you get 20 dust, and it costs 100 dust to make one. For an epic card, disenchanting gives you 100, and making one costs 400. And then for a legendary, disenchanting gives you 400, and making one costs 1600. I mean, the one thing you'll notice is these are kind of daisy-chained, right? Like, if I disenchant a legendary, I can craft an epic. If I disenchant an epic, I can craft a rare. And if I disenchant a rare, it actually takes 2 rares to make a common. But the point is so, like, it's fairly easy to get. Like, if you want, you know, if you're crafting, you decide cards you want to play, and it's fairly easy to get the common and rare cards you want. Like, right now, he spent $50. I mean, both of these cards are not the greatest cards in the game. I mean, they're legendary, so they're okay, but they're not really played in most decks. So you could disenchant these two, and you'd automatically have 800 dust, which would let you get like 8 rares. You know, so I mean, you'll be able to get like all the rares you need for pretty much any deck. You know, just by disenchanting a few of those. And like, I mean, you have a lot. Like, same thing, an epic. If you don't want an epic, like this guy's not really played. These two aren't really played. This is okay, but you could disenchant it, and this is not really played. So you could disenchant all those, and once again, you'll have a whole bunch of rares and commons. So, I mean, with spending $50, you're definitely probably going to have enough to make like a really competitive deck. You know, I mean, I already have like guides on my blog that show you how to make like decks with only rares and commons for most of the classes, and so that is something that probably will do today in helping him build a deck. But the other thing you want to keep in mind is like, will I ever use this in the future, right? Like, if you're ever going to use this in the future, you probably should hold off on disenchanting it. If you're pretty sure you're not going to use it in the future, for example, I'd highly doubt he's going to use this card, it's probably okay to disenchant it. He's probably never going to play this card. It's probably okay to disenchant it. This thing could pop up. Maybe it's okay. This is a good card. You'd probably want to save it. And obviously this is hard for a new player, not knowing which cards are good and which cards aren't. Hopefully, like, I can help him do this today, and it might show people a little bit. I mean, obviously he doesn't have every card, so I may actually, that's another idea for blog posts, is like showing like which cards are okay to disenchant. That might be kind of some cool blog. So, all right.
Should we go ahead and build a deck?
Yeah, we can go ahead and build a deck. So the first thing you want to figure out when you're building a deck is you want to figure out what class you want to play. Now, obviously, so far he's played Mage and Priest. Those are the only two he's played.
Does one have an advantage over the other?
Yes, I mean, so oh, he's asking if one class has an advantage over another class, and the answer is yes, somewhat. Some classes are better than others, sort of. Now, I think all 9 classes are good enough to get Legendary with, and I think if you're a good player, you can get all the way to the top ranks with every class. It is harder with some classes than others. For example, like if we go and look at these classes, I'll just talk about each one real quick. Warrior, there's 2 styles of deck with Warrior. There's an aggressive deck and a control deck that are sort of the most common ways to build Warrior. You need to spend a lot of money or have played the game a lot to build the control Warrior. That being said, the aggro Warrior is very cheap to build, and so that's an option. Shaman, I think, is one of the easiest classes to build a really good deck for fairly cheap. You don't need a lot of legendaries to play Shaman. Same for Rogue. I mean, legendaries will help you a little bit, but you don't really need them to play Rogue. For Paladin, it's sort of the same as the Warrior. If you want to play the control Paladin, you need a lot of cards and a lot of legendaries and stuff like that, but playing an aggro Paladin's pretty cheap. For Hunter, I really feel like you do need one legendary. You don't need it, but like to get to the highest level, you'd probably want it. That's it. I mean, other than that, pretty easy to build. Druid is fairly expensive. You need legendaries and epics to play Druid, I think, fairly well. Warlock's one of the cheap ones. It's pretty easy to build a Warlock deck with no epics and legendary that's good enough to go all the way up. Mage is, I mean, famous streamer Trump, like, he went all the way to Legend with a Mage that had 1 epic in it, so I mean, it's obviously doable with Mage. Priest is another one that I feel like you need some expensive cards for. So, based on what you like to play and what style you like to play, some of them are more expensive than others. Now, if you're willing to, you know, shell out the money to get all the cards, they're all good. Even if you're willing to shell out the money to get all the cards, I still think some of the classes are weaker. I think Mage, Priest, and Paladin are the 3 that I consider kind of the weakest. And then sort of in the next tier is like the Rogue and the Druid, and then I think Hunter, Warlock, Warrior, and Shaman are like the 4 best ones. That's my personal opinion, but
So I haven't played those yet, and you mentioned different styles of play. I don't necessarily understand what you mean by those terms.
Okay, so in card games in general, the 2 basic styles of play are what I would call aggressive and control. And basically, aggressive means that you're the aggressor and you're attempting to overwhelm the opponent and win before the opponent can react to what you're doing. So what that means is playing a lot of cheap cards, playing a lot of stuff fast, and just trying to make the game go fast. The game still may not go fast because they can react, right? But your goal is to be the aggressor, to be the person making the decisions, to be the person who's forcing them to react. The second style of card games is control, which means that you're trying to control the game. You're playing reactive on purpose. You're playing cards that deal with their threats, and then eventually you win the game with some big late game cards that you kind of grind them out, and then all of a sudden by the end of the game you have control of the game. So those are sort of the 2 main styles of card game play. I always recommend playing aggressive for new players. The reason for that is because I don't think it's easier. I mean, I think it's cheaper, especially for Hearthstone. To play control decks in Hearthstone, you probably need a lot of legendaries that are expensive. You don't need a lot of legendaries to play aggressive decks. There's a third style, which is just mid-range, which just means it's sort of in the middle. It means like you're not quite a control deck and you're not quite an aggro deck, but you can play either one. So when you're playing versus the control deck, you kind of turn into the aggro deck because you're the one who's the aggressor. And when you play versus the aggressive deck, you turn into the control deck because you're the defender. But it's just sort of more in the middle. But that's also something I really wouldn't recommend for total new players. For total new players, I think you should kind of decide like which strategy you want to go with, whether you want to play proactively or reactively, and then just build your deck in that way.
Okay. So I want to play aggressive, obviously, based on your recommendation. But the four classes you discussed for beginners, I haven't used. Which one would you suggest I try? Because we'll just build a deck today for that, and I'll see how well I do with it.
Okay. As a starting player, I would probably not start with Shaman. I think Shaman's like one of the hardest classes to play. So I would pick either Warrior Hunter or Warlock as a starting player. I think Warrior might be the best starting player card or starting player class, mainly because you can build a pretty strong deck with just the basic cards, and you need the hunter deck is very challenging to play as well. It's a lot more combination oriented, where you have to use cards together. So as a brand new player, like that's a little harder to learn. The Warlock, what makes the Warlock strong is his hero power allows you to pay life to draw cards, but it also means that you have to be really sort of tactically sound in when you use your hero power. The Warrior's hero power is simply adding 2 armor, so it's good for racing. And I think the Warrior's the best basic class as far as like for a total beginner. You're just going to play some guys, you're going to like try to kill their guys and kill them, and then if you have 2 extra mana, you'll use your power, but it's not like integral to the strategy. And it's more forgiving than the Hunter or the Warlock, and it's not as complicated as the Shaman. So the Warrior's the one I would recommend, I guess, for a total new player. So I guess that's what we're going to do, is we're just going to build a Warrior deck then. So he has not even played Warrior yet, so he doesn't even have any of the basic cards. So what we're going to do now is we're going to build like a Warrior deck with the cards he has and not even having all the basic cards, which is a little challenging, but should be interesting. Well, I mean, you need to have a deck to play with to start getting the cards,
so we'll
right?
build a new deck once,
When you unlock cards, you'll probably like we can even play some games. So the other thing is, this is just driving me nuts because I am a control freak or something, I guess, but like having all these cards saying they're new is driving me crazy. So I'm just gonna like go do this. So he has a nice start. I mean, he spent 50 bucks, so although this is weird. Oh, this is something else, I guess, for new players. So you just spent 50 bucks, you got all these cards that you unlocked. Notice he has 3 of this card. Well, you can never use more than 2 of cards, so there's no reason to keep any extras. If you go to the crafting mode here, there's a button that will automatically let you disenchant all your extra cards. So he's already got 265 dust worth of extra cards. I mean, these cards are all cards that are literally just, you can never use them, so there's no reason not to disenchant them. And then for your very first quest, you got 300. You got when the first time you disenchant, you get some dust. So he's already starting out with 360 dust here. That'll help us a lot in building our deck. I'm actually going to literally straight up. I posted a guide on Heart Junkies for building a new player deck and which rares you want to craft and stuff like that. I'm probably going to end up crafting a lot of those same rares. He already has some dust, so I'm going to go ahead and use his dust. So like cards that I like to play are basically I like this Mortal Strike card and I like this Arathi Weaponsmith card. Well, we have 360 dust. This is only 100, so I'm going to create 2 of these, and I'm going to create 2 weaponsmiths. Another reason to, like, since he's just starting out, so warriors are defined by weapons. That's kind of one thing that, as a warrior, you're always going to use the weapons. And so, like, being that he's only played mage and priest, he may not have used weapons. But a weapon is kind of like, it goes on your hero and it allows your hero to attack. You take damage when you use it, but the benefit of the weapons are they effectively will give you effective card advantage because, like, it has durability, and the durability defines how much times you can use it. So this thing will allow you to use it twice, so you can kill 2 of their guys.
3 damage and has durability of 2.
Yeah, exactly. So you can use it twice, and so that means you can probably kill 2 of their minions with it. So, all right. So getting started. Cards you want to play in every single warrior deck. I mean, Fiery War Axe is like 100% you want to play in every single warrior deck. You probably want to play Frothing Berserker in every single warrior deck. It's just, as you learn more about Hearthstone, you'll realize that like paying 3 mana for a 2/4 is pretty decent. I mean, it has 4 health. It's very hard to deal with. A lot of things do 3. It's harder to do 4. But this thing also gets bigger when minions take damage. And since we're going to be playing, you know, minions, obviously, I crafted these cards. I'm obviously going to play those. And the other thing is upgrade is probably something we want to play as well. Normally I would play 1 upgrade. I'm going to play 2 upgrades because he has to, and because he doesn't have all the cards unlocked yet, so he doesn't have as many weapons as he would normally have, and this gives him a few more. Like, this thing either creates a 1/1 weapon, or it either creates a 1/3 weapon, or it gives your current weapon +1/+1. I think it's generally better to use on your current weapons. Like, say example, you played this and then you make it a 4/3 weapon. That means you can do a lot of damage with that weapon, right? But you know, especially as just starting out, like there's a decent amount of players who will be playing things that have 1 toughness. So just playing this will allow you to play this, kill their 1 mana guy, and.
Do these stack? So if I use 2 of them, could I make this like a 5/4 weapon?
Yes, you could.
Wow.
Yes, you could stack the upgrades. I'm probably immediately going to go against my own advice and play more spells than I told you to. But in general, like, Heroic Strike is another card I think we definitely want to play in this deck, mainly because in general, you want to be controlling the board, and this is only 2 mana to do 4 damage. Once again, like I said, as the warrior, you're taking a lot of damage yourself, but the warrior's hero power allows you to gain health effectively, so it's not as bad. The next thing we want to do is go through and play like actual minions. So, I mean, already you can see, like, I've already got this thing fairly early game oriented, right? But you definitely want to have more early game stuff. Like, this guy is a card that a lot of the 1 mana plays in Hearthstone kind of suck because they don't do anything else. The reason why this guy is pretty good is because even if they just kill him right away, they'll still take 2. So he's still doing something even when he dies. They can...
He costs more, or generates more damage than he costs to play.
In general, yeah. So I like him. In general, we want... I mean, we can craft cards. This card is a really good card in Warrior. I recommend playing this card in Warrior. It gains attack equal to the attack of your weapon. So not only is it fairly big as far as being like, you know, 2 or 3 health, but
why is it called a pirate?
Just in general, things in Hearthstone have. He asked why this is called a pirate.
Does it provide you any extra value?
It does provide you value, but depending, like there are cards that, for example, could give a benefit to a pirate. You probably won't be playing any of those specifically. But that is a mechanic in Hearthstone where sometimes it matters. Like there are Hunters play Beast decks, and there's Murloc decks as well. So the Bloodsail Raider is a card which will... Most times you will play it without getting the bonus, but late game it's still going to be a pretty nice card, because if you have Fiery War Axe in play and then you play this guy, now all of a sudden he's a 5/3 for only 2 mana. That's, you know, huge for only 2 mana. So he's a really good one to have. And generally I play I mean, I don't know if you want me to just craft cards or if you want me to just use the cards you have. I mean, for now,
Feel free to craft.
I feel like right now you may as well just use cards you have mostly, and then I mean you can always, like, as you get more, because I mean you don't even know if you're going to like this class or not. I mean, it's probably best to use the cards you have, and I mean I did craft these.
Are there any major holes? Because if we have to craft to fill some major holes, I'm fine with that.
Okay, well so that's the thing, like,
deck that's going to be fun to play.
right. So I'm just gonna, like, so he's asking if there are major holes. He wants to fill major holes. So there aren't. The answer is like, so this deck is based off like Reynad's Warrior deck, which he runs Fairy Dragon in. Now, instead of Fairy Dragon, I'm just going to run Acidic Swamp Ooze because, I mean, it's still a 3/2 for 2 mana. It's easier to kill, but it also has some benefit in the fact that you can kill your opponent's weapons. It's fine. I don't think we need to craft Fairy Dragons just to play this deck. This is just as good or almost as good. And so, on the other hand, he really does need these weaponsmiths. They're very key because, especially being that he doesn't have the other weapons. Also, like, you know, so a lot of people would run Argent Squire. I think Upgrade's kind of a good replacement for Argent Squire, so I don't need to craft that. Mortal Strike is kind of necessary because if somebody gets behind a taunt wall, like, you need to have something that can damage the opponent directly, so I feel like that's necessary as well.
So am I low on weapons?
You're low on weapons because you don't have them yet because you haven't, like, played the class yet.
Craft those?
Well, you can't craft basic cards. You can so you have to get to level 10 with all the heroes to unlock all the basic cards. So, and I believe the Arcanite Reaper, which is it's 5 mana for a 5/2 weapon. In order to get that card, I believe you need to get level 10 with the warrior. It's either 8 or 10. So the next thing is the 3s. So I'm obviously just going to run the Harvest Golem. He already has those. That's great. For the 4s, normally you would run the Korkron Elite, which is another card that he hasn't unlocked yet. But once again, I mean, you can just play a big 4. I might play the Dark Iron Dwarf because we have one, and I'll play the Chillwind Yeti. For the 5s, I mean, we just use this basic card. I mean, this card just does damage to the opponent. So with this deck in general, you're trying to just do damage to your opponent a lot. I mean, you still will want to kill their minions, but a lot of times you just want to kill them. So the other thing is, like, so I will go ahead and craft the Argent Commander because I think, well, let's see, he only has 80 dust though. For a beginner deck, I mean, I can just play this guy. And then probably want another 5, which thinking about trying this thing. Just in general, beginners have a hard time dealing with things with a lot of health. So, like, you know, this thing has 7 health, this thing has 6 health. You know, the Yeti being a 4/5 is really good. Those cards are good even later in the game. I'm going to play another Yeti. So, if we look at our spread, like I was saying, you can see I have kind of like sort of a bell curve, but I'm missing the, like, there's this dip on the 3s. So I feel like, you know, adding a couple 3s to this deck is a decent way to go. Alternately, you could add, you know, 1s or something just because they're also cheap, but I would probably just add some 3. So, and this is kind of cool. It's an epic. It'd be better if you had more of your own Divine Shields. This is always cool. You can heal your creatures with it or heal yourself, so I'll probably play that one.
What do you think about taunt? Is it important to have a lot of taunt in the deck?
Taunt is something new players often play a lot of, and the reason why I don't think it's a good idea is, in general, as you play other new players, like, taunts are weaker than their corresponding equivalent minion.
Penalty if you're trying to play aggressive.
Right. So, like, say yeah, he's asking, you know, whether he's paying a penalty if he's playing aggressive with a taunt, and the answer is yes. For example, like, Goldshire Footman only does 1 damage. In theory, it trades with the Leper Gnome, I guess, but the Leper Gnome's still going to do 2 damage to them or whatever. You know, like, if you play there's a 2/2 taunt guy. Doesn't look like he has him. 3/3 taunt guy. I mean, he's okay. Don't get me wrong, but there's no way he's as good as this guy. I mean, this guy's effectively has the potential to take over a game by himself. This guy's like effectively 2 creatures in 1, you know. I mean, some taunts are good. I mean, like, you could play the Taz Dingo instead of the Yeti, and you only lose 1 power, but that could make all the difference, right? Like, if I'm attacking someone, if I'm killing their guy, the fact that I'm doing 3 instead of 4, it matters. And as the aggressor, like, I don't I expect the opponent to be on their back foot. I expect them to be the one who wants taunt. And I would rather have more efficient attack power than more efficient defense, you know. So I think taunt is a good mechanic, but I don't think it's something you need. I mean, if you're the
Focus on it.
yeah, you don't need to focus on it at all. Although it is okay. So we have room for one more card. We could add another 3. We could just add another late game card. We could add some random legendary just because you have it. I mean, these are both kind of bad, so probably don't want to play those.
Well, should we craft those two? Get rid of them and get something else?
We could, but I think it's smarter for now to just wait. Like, I think as a new player, what I would recommend doing is, and maybe I even went too far, you know, like I crafted him, I wasted his, 300 dust he had and crafted him 2 rares and 2 commons. As a new player, I might actually try to get all the classes to level 10, figure out which one you want, and then, or which one you like, and then do some research and figure out, like, we'll just play this. I don't know. It's not great in your deck, but it could be good against someone else if they're playing a Divine Shield. And worst case scenario, it's 3/3 for 3. So,
Got our first deck?
this is the first deck. Okay, so, all right, guys. So, and then the next thing, basically, what you would want to do is you'd want to play this to level 10, and ideally, you play all the classes to level 10. You follow similar principles in trying to build a nice bell curve, mana curve. Probably trying to focus more on aggressive decks. In general, I think 1 mana cards in Hearthstone, 1 mana creatures in Hearthstone aren't great. There's some classes that can play them, but in general, you're starting at 2s. Especially like if you get the coin, you can play a 2 on turn 1 anyways. So playing a turn 1/2 and a turn 2/2, and then a turn 3, 3 or whatever, is pretty good. I would just focus on this same style of curve with all those decks. A lot of the neutral cards could be played with any class, and basically get them all to level 10, and you figure out like which one you like. Once you figure out which ones you like, then you do some more research, find out the best cards for that class, that kind of stuff. So this basically, if I were you, what I would do is I'd go through, get this class to level 10. You know what? When you get a new card, feel free to aim me and say, hey, should I play this card? What should I cut for it, etc. And, we do that, and then you decide, hey, I'm having fun with this, or I don't like this, or whatever,
Thanks for helping.
Yeah.
For helping me.
All right, so I'm going to upload this video to the blog and everything. If anyone has any additional questions, comments, concerns, or whatever, feel free to, send me a message on Twitch or comment on the post and all that. I may do something again like this with him after he's played his 10 games. Maybe we'll take another look at it, readjust it, and do all that sort of stuff. Anyways, that's